Hey, New Life. We are going to focus this week on the two great commandments that Jesus gives us. Think about that. He boils everything down into two commandments. Shouldn't we focus on that, pay attention to it, and figure how to live that way in our lives? I think so. It's pretty important. But in order to understand where Jesus is coming from and how his audience heard him, we need to give a bit of background. You see, between the Old Testament and the New Testament stand 400 years of history. A lot happens in 400 years. Think about our own country. 400 years ago, there wasn't even a United States. A lot's changed even since our founding. Things have changed culturally, and even within our own spiritual ideas, things have progressed. The same thing was true in the world of ancient Judaism. In fact, without the long preparatory work of ancient Judaism, the teachings of Jesus would be unimaginable. Now, let me illustrate this for you in a couple of instances. First of all, how many of you have ever struggled to pray the Psalms? Or at least some of them. I know I have. Because the psalmist has a very black and white view of humanity. God save me, protect me, help me. Of course, I'm the righteous one, right? And pour out your wrath against everybody who's my enemy, even if they happen to be from my own family. The problem with that is when we look ourselves in the mirror, well, I may have my righteous days. I sometimes don't have righteous days, but a lot of times I'm right there in that middle of, well, good and bad. The other thing to point out, have you also struggled sometimes when you read through, let's say, like a book like Deuteronomy, where God's blessing is often connected with our obedience? Well, that can also be a bit problematic sometimes too, because, well, how do we square that with the prosperity of the wicked that we sometimes see in our own world? All of this is going to come to a head in the 2nd century BC when a Jewish sage is going to make this statement. Be not like servants who serve their master with an eye for reward. Rather, be like servants who serve their master with no eye for reward, and let the fear of heaven be upon you. This is the first time in human history where anybody said you serve God because he's God, not to get a reward out of him. In fact, standing behind this statement is Deuteronomy 6:13, which says, you will fear the Lord your God, and him only will you serve. Now, the question then is going to come, okay, well, the Bible does speak about reward, right? But what is the basis of that reward if it's not to serve God? I serve God out of love. I serve God out of fear, which in the Bible doesn't mean I'm afraid of him. It means I'm honoring him. I love him. In fact, loving God and fearing God in the Old Testament are the same thing. So what then becomes the basis of reward? And they're going to look at another passage. And that passage is going to become central. And that is Leviticus 19:18. Which says, and you will love your neighbor as yourself. In fact, as we're going to see, Leviticus 19:18 is going to serve as a lens through which we interpret loving God. Of course, the central commandment in the Bible for loving God is Deuteronomy 6:5. And you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. Well, how do I go about doing that? And this is where Leviticus 19:18 became so foundational. In fact, the way that it's going to be understood by Jesus' contemporaries is, and you will love your neighbor who is like yourself. Remember, I don't serve God to receive a reward from him. I serve him because he's God. Let me say this. In the Bible, it's very simple. The question is, who is the king? Are you or is God? Of course, the answer of the Bible is God alone is king. So the relationship is simple. He makes the rules, we follow them. Our problems come when we get that relationship out of line. But again, I'm not serving him to get a reward. But he does reward. So what becomes that basis? How I treat another who is like myself. Think about this a moment. You and I are more alike than either of us is like God. And the way that Jesus' contemporaries are going to begin to understand it is, in fact, between me and God stands you. The way that I relate to you, God will relate to me. Therefore, if I want mercy, I show mercy. Remember Jesus' beatitude? Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Also, he's going to command his followers, judge not, lest you be judged. For in the manner with which you judge, you also will be judged. In other words, in the way that I judge others, God will hold me accountable to that same standard. Ouch. In Jesus' mind, the way that we love God with all our heart, soul, and strength is by loving our neighbor who is like ourselves. So it's not that we first love God, then we love our neighbor. It's actually that we love God by loving our neighbor. Let me give you a couple of examples of this in the teachings of Jesus. You'll remember in Matthew chapter 5, he's speaking to people that live in the Galilee. The Galilee is 3.5 days minimum by foot journey to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is where the temple and the altar stood. And he says to these Galileans, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that someone has something against you, leave your gift, go be reconciled, and then come back and offer your gift. Now, hear this the way his audience heard this. They had just traveled at least 3.5 days by foot. They're standing at the altar in the temple of Jerusalem, which they saw as the house of God. And all of a sudden they remember that someone has something against them. Leave your gift, go be reconciled, and then come back. Again, we love God by loving our neighbor who is made in his image. This was so central to the teaching of Jesus. In fact, this revolution of thought, if you get your mind wrapped around it, you will find it almost in every page of the Gospels. Because for Jesus, this was the foundation of our relationship with God, how we treat others. I want to look at a passage for a moment that illustrates this very well. It's found in Luke chapter 10, verse 25 and following. Here, a lawyer is going to come to Jesus and ask him the question, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? So let's read. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What is written in the law, and how do you read it? And he answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Now, why does he connect these two passages? Because these are two of only 4 instances in the entire Old Testament that begin with the phrase, "and you will love." So in other words, the lawyer is trying to interpret how to love God with all his heart, soul, and strength through loving his neighbor like himself. And he said to him, "You have answered right. Do this and you will live." In other words, you got an A+ on the test, now go do it. But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Notice this is the natural follow-up question to what Jesus had just said, but also understand what lies behind this question. Jesus, draw me a circle. I don't care how big, how wide it is, but just draw a circle and tell me who's in that I'm obligated to love and who's out that I'm permitted not to. Jesus is going to tell a story. That story is based off a third instance of the "and you will love," which is Leviticus 19:34, which says, "And you will love the foreigner." So let's read Jesus' story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. You actually do go down. In 13 miles, you descend from 2,700 feet above sea level to 1,200 feet below sea level. And he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Circle that word "half dead," because the tension of this story is caught up in that phrase. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, pass by on the other side. Now, we read this and we see that, and immediately we think, man, those guys were jerks. How could they do that to this individual? Go back to the word "half dead." The biggest issue within the first century in Judaism was the question of ritual purity. Now, if this man who is considered half dead dies and the priest and the Levite help him, they become ritually impure. Now, ritual impurity has nothing to do with sin. Ritual purity has everything to do with how I can function in certain settings. Okay? You could be purified of ritual impurity. But what's important here is the law of Moses dictates that priests cannot come in contact with a corpse for any reason, not even the corpse of immediate family members. They cannot even enter into the house of a dead body. So what the priest is being presented with here is a challenge, because on the one hand, here's this man dying on the side of the road. On the other hand, here is God's commandments that tell the priest he cannot come in contact with a corpse because of fear of issues of ritual purity. What does he do? Maybe you'll feel this tension in this way. Let's say that a pastor of a church has been praying and seeking God for a message for his congregation. And he feels that God has given him a word for his congregation on this day. He's driving to church. There on the side of the highway, in an old station wagon, is a family broken down on the side of the road. It looks like they have everything that they own in that station wagon. Does he stop? That's the tension that Jesus' audience felt in this story. The question is, what is more important, my calling before God or the person broken on the side of the road. By chance, a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was. Now, Jews and Samaritans did not get along. They didn't mix well at all. And when he saw him, he had compassion. And he went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave it to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." That's 2 days' wages. Now notice who is the foreigner in this story. It's actually the man broken on the side of the road. And the Samaritan is the one that shows compassion on him. The issue is not these 2 individuals, the priest and the Levites, well, they're just non-compassionate jerks. They have the tension that if they help the man and he dies, they now stand in violation of God's commandments. What do? Who is the model of this story? The Samaritan, who helped even the foreigner. Jesus then concludes his story asking this question: which of these 3 do you think proved neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? The lawyer responds, "The one who showed mercy on him." And Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." Jesus sees that the way that you and I love God with all our heart, soul, and strength is by loving our neighbor who is like ourselves. Here's the thing that's fascinating, though, for me about Jesus. Jesus didn't just preach a good word, he lived it himself. At the end of his life, he's going to be on this road that he used as the setting for this story. And on that road, when he is walking to face the cross, and the axis of human history is getting ready to come crashing down on his shoulders, surrounded by crowds, though, who are telling him how great he is. But on that road sat a man blind, who hears that Jesus is passing by. And he begins to cry out, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Now, I don't know about you, but some of us may have gotten caught up in the hype, right? Thinking that we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Others of us knowing that we're facing God's ultimate goal for our lives. We're going to have game faces on. We're going to block out everything and it's full charge ahead. But not Jesus. The one who told a story about a man broken on the side of the road and about a person who helped him. To this blind man, he stops. He says, "What do you want from me?" The guy says, "I want to see." And Jesus healed him. The way that we love God with all our heart, soul, and strength is by loving our neighbor who is like ourselves. Who do you need to be loving this week? Who do you need to be seeing that you normally pass by? Who do you need to find patience with that you normally have no patience for? Who do you need to be loving so that the people around you can really, truly believe that you love God with all your heart, soul, and strength?
Okay, I love this vision, the life of Christ. I'll never forget, I took the life of Christ in Bible college, and it changed everything that I thought about. It's like the Jesus style of the word. We all need it, and I thank you for joining us. Please do not forget to subscribe so you can really partner with us as we move through this over the next several weeks together as a church. We're growing. Let's keep it going. Don't forget to subscribe.